Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how simple it is to add a pocket to any garment that has a side seam. This is really easy to do and it's a great way to add that little bit of surprise and delight to something that you're making. You can add a hidden side seam pocket into a dress, into a basic pair of pants or a skirt, anything as long as it has a side seam. If you have a dress design that's fully lined, you would just want to make sure that you add that pocket to the dress before you attach the lining. Some examples would include the Genoa jumper or even the opening night dress. Adding pockets to that overskirt would be a really on-trend kind of thing to do. I see a lot of girls on the red carpet with their hands in their pockets, so it's a pretty popular thing to do right now and a great way to take an otherwise pretty formal and older looking design and bring it down for a younger generation. There are a few things that you'll want to keep in mind when adding your pocket. Look at the garment on your doll or measure the distance between the underarm and where her hand hits her side. For the 18-inch dolls, their arms don't bend, so you really have to look at how their arm lays and where their thumb would be able to slip into that pocket. For some other dolls, like Eloise or Barbie or even a Girl for All Time, their arms can bend at the elbow, so you have a little bit more play when you're designing where that pocket's gonna sit at the side seam. To add a pocket to a side seam, you're gonna need a garment that's already sewn, that has a side seam on it, and then you'll just need a piece of paper, measuring tape, a pen or a pencil, and then some fabric that you're gonna use to make that pocket bag out of. So to begin, I'm just gonna measure how big her hand is. And if her hand was gonna fit all the way inside a pocket, it would be about a 2-inch span. So that opening of the pocket on the side seam could be 2 inches. Now in this case, her arm is straight and her hand comes pretty far down. So I think I would just keep in mind that the only part of her hand that would probably go into the pocket would be her thumb. And she could kind of have the dress pulled out, or it looks like her hand is entering the pocket, but maybe not all the way in because her arm doesn't turn to that direction. So for this example, I know that I want to create a pocket opening on this side seam. I'm going to do 1.5 inches and have the base of that opening be where her thumb could enter. So there's 2 important things that I need to mark. The first would be how far down do I want the pocket to start and where do I want that pocket opening to end. So if I look at where her thumb's going to hit that side seam, I'm just going to mark that point with a pin, or I could mark it with a pencil. And then I'm gonna know on here that I just need to measure up 1.5 inches and I'm gonna mark that with my second pin. Then at this point, I'll take the dress off the doll and I will begin to work on creating my pocket pattern piece. I have a 1/4 inch marked right here from the edge of my piece of paper, so this will begin my first seam allowance for how I'm gonna attach the pocket to the dress. I've gone ahead and I've marked these 2 lines right here, which are 1.5 inches apart from each other. So now I'm just gonna freehand draw a pocket. And once you do this, you could use this as your template for any pocket in any garment. Just keep in mind that as you draw your pocket, you want it to slant down at the top and then circle around at the bottom, below this bottom line, and come back up so that anything that goes into the pocket sits down and weights that pocket down, and this top edge of the pocket is slanted down so that it's out of the way of anything at the top of the dress, the waistband or anything like that, and it will lay nicely into your side seam. Now once I have this piece drawn, and I'm sure it's a size that a hand could slip into, I'm gonna go ahead and then add around the outside 1/4 inch, and this will be my seam allowance for the outside of the pocket bag. And then it will come up on here as well. As we're attaching this inside line is going to be my stitching line, and this outside line here is my cut line. So this inside line will be the finished size of the pocket, and this right here is the finished opening of the pocket. Then we'll go ahead and cut out that pocket piece. Then we'll go ahead and get our fabric and we'll cut 2 for each pocket. So if you want to add a pocket to both side seams, you're going to need to cut out 4 total. So here we have that pocket bag cut out, and you can see as I unpin it, we have two pieces that mirror each other, and this is going to create our pocket. Here we have the dress that's been marked for this pocket opening. So now I'm going to need to go to the inside. Then I'm going to go ahead and open up this seam between the two pins. So I have the base pin there, and I've pulled a few stitches out already. So you can see that seam is already starting to open. So I'm just going to carefully open that the rest of the way. And this right here will be the opening in the side seam. Then I'm going to take one of my pocket pieces, and this part right here is what's going to be sewn to the side seam, this straight edge. My side seam on my dress is pressed open, which is helpful for this illustration because what I'm going to do is sew this right side to the right side of my dress fabric. But I'm going to need to pull these pins out once I get this placed to actually sew this along this side seam. So this is going to sit right here so that I have it right above my opening there, 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch below on that side as well. And I'm going to pull those pins out so that I can pin this right into this seam allowance. So I just want to be sure that I'm pinning it to my seam allowance only and not the dress itself. Now I have the dress at the machine, and I'm just going to go ahead and straight stitch this down to my dress right along this side seam. Here you can see that it has been stitched down to the dress, and if I fold it back, you can see that I have the pocket opening right here, and now I have this sewn to that side seam, right sides together. Then I'm going to grab the opposite side of the pocket, and I'm going to go ahead and sew that to this other side seam. So I just want to be sure that I have my pocket lined up, and then I'm going to lay that on this seam allowance on this side, and I'll sew that right on this seam allowance. Then I'm going to go ahead and line up my pocket, making sure that I have my top edge pushed down into this seam allowance, and the seam allowance will close over it like this on both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and just pin this right here. And then what I'm going to do is line up the whole perimeter, making sure that I have the bottom of the pocket also folded together and the seam allowance covering that there as well. Then I'm just going to begin a little bit above the pocket on the existing side seam. I'm going to sew about 3 or 4 stitches down the side seam, and then with the needle in the down position, I'm going to turn right at the top of the pocket, and I'll sew all the way around this pocket edge. And then you can go ahead and finish that edge as well with a zigzag or serge that edge. But you'll continue around the perimeter of the pocket, keeping all the edges lined up until you get to the bottom side of the pocket, where you're at that point going to turn with your needle in the down position and then sew a few stitches down into this existing side seam so that your side seams are secure, and then your opening will also be secure at both sides. So now you can see that pocket bag has been stitched. This is the pocket on the inside of the dress right here. And from the outside, we have a tiny little pocket opening. Then just check as well if you have any little threads hanging out, you just want to trim those off from the original side seam. And then finish off by pressing it nicely so that the pocket bag lays nice on the existing side seam. Then we'll go ahead and slip the dress back on the doll, and you can see from my original design idea that just her thumb would poke into that pocket and she can kind of hold her dress open to the side. Now this dress is too big for this doll. This is a BFC ink doll, but I just wanted to show you if her arm bent and her hand could come in at a diagonal position, you would see that her hand could slip right into a pocket that's designed like that. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I'd love to see what you've made. So be sure to jump over to the Facebook group and show us some of the designs that you've added hidden pockets into.